Mate, the last couple of times I've done this, I recorded a separate intro on my own.
Nice.
And I sound like a total knob when I'm not talking to someone. So what we're going to do is, so today, dear listeners, we're talking to a good mate of mine, Dr. James Sachiva. He's a chiro in Newcastle, runs out of Transition Chiropractic, and James is possibly the fittest man alive. You know what, mate? I was thinking about it. I'm pretty sure I had a horse once that had a higher resting heart rate than you do. Like, without a word of a lie. What do you sit at?
Pre-race, I was down to about 44.
Yeah. My horse was like 50. So you beat my horse, mate. You're better than a thoroughbred. You weapon. But so what I wanted to what we're talking to James about is a whole bunch of things. James is a super athlete. He's just done a Ultraman, which is somewhat grueling. And mate, run us through what happens with an Ultraman, because it just sounds like 3 days of hell.
So you're not far from the truth. It starts, day one's a 10K swim, then into 145Ks on the bike.
On day one.
Day one. And you've got 12 hours to finish your day. Day two is 275Ks on the bike. And then day three is just a little jog, just a double marathon, so 84Ks of running.
Oh, yeah, just a little jog. Yeah, just phone that in. Yeah, you just go out for a bit of it, mate. That is, and like, how many people were competing there?
It was 49 people competing.
49, and you came in top 10?
Yeah, yep.
Mate, that is huge. That is huge. So, like, I mean, I remember when we went through uni, 13 odd years ago. Like, you didn't want to run to second base in baseball. And
my idea of running was running to the bar. That was about it.
Yeah, that times change. So, mate, that's huge. It's like, I mean, you see a lot with people when they're doing marathons, and there's that curse of, post-marathon. You've gone through that catabolic window where you're starting to then eat your muscles and break down sort of all of those yummy tissues that keep us alive. I imagine with Ultraman you're doing that and then some. How's like recovery off something like that?
I think one of the different things is, number one, you're going at a lot lower heart rate. You can't go at that high level for that long, so your energy stores, you're not taxing into them as deep. But because you are going for multiple days, it's a weird catch-22 between, okay, I need to eat enough to fuel for this day, but I've also got to eat enough for tomorrow. So
yeah, because I mean, if you're working out for 12 hours of the day, like how many calories were you on?
Look, I don't count. I don't know. I know during the bike I was trying to get down the good part of probably about 100 calories an hour.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, that's a lie. Almost 100 grams of carb an hour.
Yeah.
Which, once again, I don't count, so I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
Just trying to give that a shot.
Plenty of energy. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was that, staying in your aerobic capacity versus your anaerobic capacity, and sort of the difference between, so, you start to hit that anaerobic threshold too much, your body's going to start to break down tissues because you're not breathing efficiently enough, or there's not enough oxygen floating around your system, so your body has to break down tissues in a nasty way and produce lactic acid and all that sort of thing so that you've got the energy to pump those muscles. So with something like I suppose even a marathon and an Ultraman, is that where like you really don't want to hit that anaerobic phase, or you've really got to make sure your aerobic capacity. So yeah, where do you sit with that?
Yeah, look, there's been a heap of research done with that, and I think a lot of it does come back down to your training. Phil Maffetone, who's initially a chiropractor, has done truckloads of work in that aerobic capacity, and his theory is basically 180 beats per minute minus your age is essentially the maximum you should be working out at. So that's really, for me, that puts a max at about 143. In fairness, I did so much of my training in a very low aerobic state. My average heart rate for the day one bike, I believe, was 131. For day two, was only about 124. And then for the double marathon on day three, was about that 129 mark. So if and whenever I did spike into that anaerobic stage, it was for very, very small amounts. And that was reflective of most of my training.
Yes, okay, so you just got to really get that VO2 max as efficient as possible because, well, 180 minus, that really doesn't give you much if you're, a good push up a hill is going to spike you over that.
Yeah, and like I keep talking about trying to train the diesel. I didn't have much high octane for this race at all. It was just the one thing I knew how to do was grind out that low heart rate for a long time.
And is that different? I mean, because, Jesus, marathon to me would certainly kill me. But, I mean, compared to an Ultraman, a marathon, that's your training run. Do you feel that, everyone's got that different aerobic capacity, I suppose. So, do you feel that, if you were to do a marathon on its own, that you would be dipping into that anaerobic and putting on the burst of sprint a little bit more than sticking to the grind?
You just have a different type of grind. You still, I'm not going to be running. I'm not close on breaking the 2-hour marathon mark, that's for sure. And for us, it'd be very much still an aerobic day. It just has to be. It's just probably a different aerobic threshold that you're hitting, as opposed to it's a higher aerobic level as opposed to the 122s. It might be a 135 to maybe a 140 for me.
A little bit more wriggle room, but not much.
Yeah.
Hey, so run me through building up to an event like that. What's your training looking like? How do you go from running 2 bases at uni to, a couple of years later you're doing a 3 days of hell? What was the total? It's like 500 and what's the total distance you covered?
515 Ks in total.
So mate, how do you go from step 1 to step 2 there?
So I guess it was almost 12 months ago that I started the journey and thought, okay, well, I want to get fit and want to have a crack at Ultraman. And, I'd done a fair few Ironmans by then. I'd done a couple of marathons. So I'd had a pretty big aerobic base as it was. So this time last year, I wanted to really focus on actually trying to get some strength back though. So, I wasn't really worried too much about the aerobic side of things. I was more worried about the body breaking down. So did some specific strength work in the gym, pretty short indoor trainer sessions on the bike, 1 hour max sort of things, and tried to run fairly regularly. But once again, last winter was all about small doses. That probably didn't really change until about October. At the end of October, I did the Fitz's Challenge, which is supposed to be the hardest one-day bike ride in Australia. That was a tough day. It was 255k ride down to Canberra, and that was a little bit over 10 hours, which once I got through that, I thought, okay, well, if I can do that on pretty limited training, maximum of a 6-hour bike ride in training, then I can certainly get through the bike leg for Ultraman.
Yeah, Jesus.
And then we ticked off a 10k ocean swim down at Balmoral just before Christmas, and that was one of the most boring sufferfests I've ever done. And I was just, but that was the part of the race that I was absolutely sweating bullets about. I did not know if I'd be able to swim 10k. So once I got through that, I was like, hey. Even if I have to walk a marathon, I know I can ride the distance and I can swim that far.
Because the swim was leg 1, wasn't it? That was the first thing off the... Yeah, okay. So, if you could do... Yeah, it's just... Because I was wondering if you had to do the cycle first and then do a 10k swim, that's going to be battle. But, swim off the... But I start sinking after 2ks. You must be just going don't sink, don't sink, don't sink, don't sink.
Seriously.
don't drown.
You got to love a wetsuit to keep you buoyant, mate.
Yeah, mate, a couple of little bubble wrap around the body, give you a bit more buoyancy. Is that part of the routine?
Oh well, they absolutely allow wetsuits for this sort of distance because they're just trying to make sure you don't drown. You've got literally a 6-hour cutoff window for the swim. So
yeah, okay. Oh,
yeah.
jeez. Man, that is brutal. So with that weight training that you were doing in sort of prep of the Ultraman, what sort of specifics? So was that more like you're doing stability based work, or you trying to get the sort of hip and shoulder movement down controlled as possible? Yeah, what was your routine there?
I went for the basics. I went back to a 5x5 workout for a good couple of months just to get some general full body strength. So, your squats 3 times a week, your deadlifts, your bench press, chin ups, military press, and of course a little bit of core stuff thrown in there. That was me for a while, and then once I felt I was strong enough, so to speak, I went into a bit more stability, single leg stuff, Turkish get-ups. We have a great sled at the gym, Beautiful. So I took advantage of using the sled a fair bit. And of course, a bit of mobility stuff thrown in there too.
Yeah. So what's your rehab routine look like? I mean, because just the sheer amount of Ks you're putting your body through on a like weekly basis in the lead up to something like that, you'd have to be, regular chiro, regular mobility work. What's your routine look like?
The hardest part about recovery is towards the end, I was probably logging close on 30 hours a week training for a pretty solid month to 2 months for basically for most of March and April. So when it came to doing extra recovery, I more often than not had to put my husband and father hat back on, and it wasn't so much about stretching and rolling out, unfortunately. It was making sure I wasn't going to get divorced at the end of this race.
That's a rehab. Yeah.
So, in all fairness, I was getting adjusted at least every fortnight, if not weekly, which was great. I had a massage pretty well weekly for the last probably 2 months leading up to the race. And I had a very kind massage therapist friend of mine who lent me a pair of those recovery pumps, kind of like the Normatec style recovery pumps, and you'd slide them up your leg, plug them into the wall, and that was like a deliberate compression pump, and that was half hour. And I did that pretty well daily.
Okay. And so what's the thought process there? Is that just pumping out lactic acid, or just getting rid of inflammation? What's the conceptual idea behind the rehab with that compression?
The rehab there, the idea of compression is it decreases muscle vibration and then also shifts that lactic threshold. So not shifts the threshold, but shifts the lactic from pooling down your legs. I've got pretty crappy circulation. And I think that's part to do with my stupid low heart rate. It's very easy for me to travel like on a plane and end up with really swollen ankles. So I'll virtually every day in the office, especially when I was training, I'd be wearing compression socks, or at least calf sleeves, just to keep the crap away from my lower legs.
So I found like with all of my sort of distance athletes, that sort of compression socks during the day has made a big difference.
I think it's really big. Like, I find a big difference because I commute to work. One of the ways to try and get the most out of my training is that I'm lucky enough to have a half-hour commute in the pushy to and from work each way. And if I've had those socks on, I feel so much fresher jumping onto that bike at the end of a day.
Do you feel like you're looking after yourself quite well there from like the chiro and the massage, so you're more passive rehab points. So not having the time, totally understandable with kids and everything else that goes on to do your half hour of foam rolling and all that nonsense. Do you put that down to, obviously you didn't need it because you still did super well in that Ultraman race. So do you think, because you've been doing this for a while now, comment on how much you feel like really good running technique had an impact on, so all I'm wondering is like if your technique's up to it, like how much do you really need to be doing that foam rolling? Because you'd think that if your technique was appropriate musculoskeletally for the way your body's operating, you shouldn't need too much of that stuff.
I think you're hitting on a can of worms there, because what I hear there is, well, it's not a problem, so I don't need to do it. And
well, I suppose,
that's when unfortunately for most of us, we only really stretch or use a roller when we're going, oh crap, it's sore. And
hey, that's an excellent point. Yeah.
You know,
too late at that stage of the game.
Yeah. Ideally, some good long static stretching post a workout would have certainly helped to improve some muscle length, which would have only benefited me in the, when you run sitting on a bike for 8 hours and running for 8 hours. Yep. Likewise, a lot of the guys out there in RE foam rollings talk about increased muscle activity and increased neurological adaptation, particularly if you use a roller pre-workout to get more muscle activation. So I don't know, but that's certainly some of the stuff that's out there, but it just wasn't going to fit into my time.
Well, because I can certainly see the necessity for having that if it's a new skill that you're developing, or if you've gone from, if I'm running 5K and I want to run 10, because it's just outside of what my body's capable of, I'm going to need to put in the effort to roll out the crap. But if your body's capable of it and you've got the technique and you now, you've got that ligamentous and tendinous strength to do the technique, then there's a pretty common rule out there known as the 10% rule. Basically, don't increase your volume by more than 10% from what you've done the previous week. So 10% of distance or 10% of time. Now, I'm not saying you have to be religious to that, but I think what you're going at there too is consistency. Consistency over years of running. I felt less injured over the last 2-3 months than I did in the lead up to Challenge Wanaka, which was an Ironman distance race in February. I was struggling a lot more in the lead up to that. But I think after that, I'd laid a fair bit of consistency in my training and the body was said, okay, we're used to this again. Okay. Yeah, beautiful. And because I know I've had a few brief chats with you when you've tried to get me into running before about proper running technique, because you're very well versed in sort of appropriate foot striking and all that sort of thing. You just want to talk a bit about what have you read that seems to be the latest and greatest as far as running and or swimming technique?
Oh, don't ask me about swimming technique. I need all the help I can get for that one.
Very cool.
I'm actually off to a weekend seminar on swimming technique in about 2 weeks, which I'm actually really looking forward to, because I want to do this. I still really love the sport and want to keep doing it better, but it's okay, we'll stop. Definition of insanity, keep banging your head against the wall, expecting different results, and that's me with my swimming right now. As far as running, the biggest thing I think I'm starting to realise now is it's not so much, foot strike is important, but in the big scheme of things, bring it back to your hips. If ideally that stride starts and finishes with your hips. Keep your feet landing underneath you, not reaching out in front. And
because that's where, if you are reaching in front, you're causing a lot of deceleration with your body mechanics, and so that and is also because I'd imagine that then increases the tempo a fair bit.
Yes, yeah. So keeping that, by not striding out so far, you find your tempo naturally flicks over a bit quicker, and if you got that foot landing right underneath you, it's much easier than coming to the rear part of the stride, which is much more efficient.
Yeah, certainly found that those few little tips that you showed me that whenever I do run, it does make running a lot easier. Matt, what I thought we should talk about next. Wind the clock back a good couple of years, and you went through that phase where a gut issue and the anemia, and that just about trashed you with a couple of those big races. Mate, run us through what happened there, because that was that just a super bad case of leaky gut? What was going on there at the end of the day? Pretty
well. Basically leaky gut. They couldn't come with a textbook medical diagnosis, so it came back to that. So August 2014, Marissa was due to give birth to Kane, and I just wasn't feeling right went in and did a blood test, and the doc rings me up and says, you need to come in now and get a blood transfusion. He goes, your iron stores are ridiculously low. My hemoglobin was less than 60. He didn't understand how I was standing up. And I was surprised because I was feeling good that day. I was getting ready to go for a run. And so I'm assuming I'd been pretty depleted leading up to that stage. In hindsight, when I look back from there, I recently had a DNF at a race that ended up with 2 stress fractures, and I'd pulled out of another race because I knew this is going to be a really bad thing for me to do. I remember training or going to the gym still, and pretty well every time I shifted positions, my vision would go blurry and I'd almost have like little black lines running behind my eyes, and I just thought, it's normal. I'm just pushing myself.
Yeah. Okay.
So the diet was okay. I wasn't bleeding, but I wasn't absorbing anything. And the theory at the end of the day was, okay, you're not sleeping enough, you're overstressed, you're too concerned about this new barb, you're running a small business. And I was just so freaking worried. I remember going for a run at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning because I didn't know what else to do.
Stress kicking your ass.
Stress was kicking my ass. And one of the obvious things was having a really low training heart rate. My heart rate would hardly ever go up during an exercise session. So I was too dumb to realise just how fatigued I was.
Mate, we've all been there.
Yeah, so for 9 months it was pretty hardcore gluten-free, including the bone broth daily. I still love the first time I drank bone broth. I didn't realise you're supposed to have it warm, and I drank cold bone broth, man.
Yeah, did it have lumpy bits in it?
That was Jello. Yeah.
Yeah,
cold bone brothy Jello.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous. Yeah, that's the mental toughness for you.
Yeah.
And so, like, start to finish, how long do you reckon it took you to repair your guts and get your... And so, like, iron absorption, do you feel that like, is that still an issue, or was that sheerly because of the gut inflammatory issue that you weren't absorbing iron? And, like, are your iron levels right now?
I haven't been tested for probably 2 years, give or take now.
Well, it's safe to say they're all right, seeing as you just conquered a 512K...
15,
you know.
515.
515, sorry, mate. So 512 was
those last 3Ks hurt. Nah.
Yeah, they did.
It definitely took a while. Like, there was a while there where I was still pretty reliant on, even with changing the diet and certainly increasing the red meat, getting off the gluten. I think the biggest thing getting off gluten helped the body absorb the non-heme iron. Non-heme iron, so your iron from your leafy greens and all that sort of stuff, its absorption is certainly impaired when it comes to wheat absorption. So I think...
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So apparently it doesn't affect heme, but it's the non-heme stuff which is slowed down when wheat competes for the same absorption spike and the molecules the same size. But I found myself for pretty well, probably 18 months to 2 years, if I was coming up to a big race, I'd still take an iron supplement. Now when I'm coming up to a big race, all I do is make sure I have a decent, couple servings of liver throughout the week, or something like that. It's stupid dense in iron. But yeah, like it was a long time when I was on probiotics every day. I haven't had to do that for ages.
Yeah, that leaky gut is a big problem. So it's stress, spiking your cortisol, throwing out your gut flora. I mean, that's a nasty spiral.
I worked with a nutritionist for a while who used to say, did you give yourself permission to eat that? And it took me a long time to understand what she meant, but I think I was so worried thinking, gluten or this and that is the devil, that I got to a stage where I just wouldn't eat. And
Oh, okay.
Just really dropped the weight, probably another 5 kilos, and just, I don't want to touch that, it might make me blow up, And of course, if I kept thinking it was going to make me blow up, I did. And so I had some very crappy race results, and as that I had, I think, 1 if not 2 more DNFs as a result of that. And I started to actually realise that food wasn't the biggest enemy. Step 1, if you're doing endurance sports, you need to eat. And
I was going to say, because if you've got if you're, I mean, it's so hard to get. I mean, if you're eating healthy, to get calories in, like cleanly, is tough. If you're just doing a regular 40-minute weights workout, if you're doing 30 hours of cardio a week, your calorie intake has got to be like getting that cleanly, without running to Macca's and that sort of thing. Like that's a lot of vegetables.
Yeah, and it's nuts. This sort of race, believe it or not, the more you go into the endurance field, the more vegetarians and vegans you seem to attract. And well played to them. I have no idea how they have the time to prep that much healthy food.
Oh, they either don't have kids or they've got a super angry wife, mate.
Seriously,
that's the you want a happy wife and have kids. You got to time from away from meal prep. That's where it comes down to, I think, mate. And one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, mate, like, so I jump on at the local gym that I go to. They've just got one of those stair stepper machines. So it's like a bunch of stairs on just a permanent escalator.
Yeah.
So I switch that on and I go for a march and think, you know what, I'm gonna do 10 minutes on this thing. I'm gonna climb a Empire State Building, whatever.
Yeah.
And I usually get about 5 minutes into it, hate myself, and I switch it off and then go home and cry.
Yeah.
So, mate, can you what are your tips for when you're hitting that grind and you're getting to that, halfway through well, I suppose if you're swimming, it's easy because, like, I've got to get back to land.
I've got to get back to land.
But when you're on your 200,000 odd kilometer bike ride, what are your mantras? What are your mental tricks for keeping your head in the game? And Josh Phillips, mutual good mate, and he's got that sort of real watching any negative thought at all. So he starts doing only a few Ks left, and then he sort of is actively in his head saying, no, I can't think that because that's the start of a negative mental spiral. Like I imagine some of that stuff's got to be so fine tuned with you. Yeah. So what are your mental toughness tricks?
Chunk it down, man. Chunk it down as much as you can. Normally for a race, thanks to being an old baseballer, I'll break down every race into 9 innings. And the nice thing about dividing it into 9 innings, it gives you 9 segments to work off. And whatever's happened in the first innings, by the time you're in that second inning, you can't change it. It's gone. It's in the past. Now you've only got 8 innings to go, and you just got to focus on where you're at that given time. And when the innings start getting tougher, you can break it down to the top and the bottom of the innings. Are you batting or are you fielding? How many strikes you got in that last hitter? I know I've certainly counted races where it's, all right, you got 2 out and the 9th, you've got 2 strikes. You just need to get this final strike and you're done. But there's always a way to chunk it down. I think if you're training...
So your short-term goals. So you say, like, I've only got 150 kilometres to go. That sounds a lot worse than... I've just got 5 kilometres left in this inning, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I was regularly doing 200k bike rides, and I do them virtually most of them by myself, and I'd be like, okay, well, yeah, I'm 115 k's in. Oh, sweet, I've only got 85 k's to go. And then in the same breath, on those long rides, you'd almost sort of extrapolate that to the race. It's like, okay, so, you get to 115 k's on a training ride, and you think, okay, so come race day, I've only got 85 k's to go. That means I'm already 200 k's in. Sweet. And start playing games like that. Or if you go into the pool was a classic for saying, okay, you've got to go do 10 500s. Now, it's pretty boring going up and down that pool 10 times, but that's just how you got to get it done. And then you can do the same with your running and just go do a track workout. Okay, today we're going to do... 6 lots of 1 mile efforts with 60 seconds rest in between. And I think you have to do some ugly sessions like that in your training. So come race day, it doesn't sound that hard. Your body and your mind's used to breaking it down, and having that small goal. Like day one on the bike, it was an out and back course. So well, once I get through 74, 75 Ks, all I've got to do is turn around and go home.
It's interesting that you favour that that sort of check, because I read a book called The Happiness Advantage by what's his name, Sean Ackers. He's done a TED talk, but it's more just sort of general psychology. But it was showing how like there's a few tricks you can look at to sort of raise your happiness level and you spike your dopamine, and one of them was like if you've got 10 things to do for the day, write a checklist of like an achievable amount of things that you can do for that day. But one trick that was it found to make it more successful is like write down 2 things in your list of 7 or whatever that you've already done, so that you can start your checklist like already partly ticked. So I've got to run 5Ks. All right, step 1, get dressed, get to the field. So I've done 2 out of 5. Now I'm just going to do so like that's it was interesting that it echoes that sort of stuff.
Headspace plays a massive part in it, man. And just I think for a lot of us that are getting into it, say you're going to the gym, you're jumping on a treadmill for 10, 20 minutes, it seems so hard. I think half the time it seems so hard is because, number one, we kind of forget to connect back to nature when we're doing this. We're doing it in the shortest space possible, and we forget to actually get outside and enjoy. And when we're doing it in the shortest time possible, we're often plugged into headphones or listening to a podcast or rocking out to music, and, man, it makes it drag. You've got to... If you want to be able to run for hours, you've got to start to enjoy running, which means you've got to start to enjoy the feet of the sound of your feet hitting the ground and the feedback and being able to listen to your body, not to the music. And the same thing on the long ride. Like, I think we confuse ourselves by trying to distract ourselves too often when we're actually trying to... The sport...
Stay in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. The sport is the thing that you're supposed to get best at, and give yourself time to focus on it.
Mate, that's some truth right there. I like that. You've inspired me to stop listening to bullshit while I'm doing my gym sessions. Mate, and look, I'd imagine
banter's one thing, bullshit's something different. Banter's good.
Yeah, mate, I can't cut out the banter.
That's good stuff.
But like, mate, I imagine you, like, with your experience now, you must be getting a whole bunch of triathlete patients up your way, Newcastle way.
Getting a few, yeah. Yeah, I've been working with a tri club here for a fair while, so I've always had a good proportion of triathletes coming in.
Beautiful, mate. Let's start to wrap up. How do people find you if they're interested in getting some advice or some therapy from you to help them prep for a distance event?
Look, work-wise, it's transitionschiropractic.com. Our emails are on there as well. Facebook, same thing. I'm assuming we're probably still on Instagram. I'm terrible with this stuff. But Transitions Chiropractic is us, and we're pretty easy to find that way.
Beautiful, mate. I'll add that in the show notes. Any closing remarks, mate? That's been good. I think we've covered everything I wanted to talk about. It's really interesting with that leaky gut and how that held you back, and then what you had to do to get it sorted. And a couple of those mental toughness tricks are going to be good. But yeah, anything you want to tell the listeners before we part ways?
Be happy with what you got. And I think there was one thing, it was, this race hurts, but I had an opportunity to race, whether or not it was the time away from work or family. I was pretty lucky and pretty fortunate to be able to be there and to race. And if you can take that same mentality into what you've got at work each day or when you're at that gym, you're pretty blessed to do what you'll be able to do. So, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, it certainly teaches you that happiness comes from within. It's not from some external cause. So,
mate, what a point to finish on. Jesus, that's awesome. And yeah, again, I think that's you really have to have that mental game down pat if you want to even think about anything like what you've done.
Yeah.
So, mate, that's huge. That's huge.
Cool.
All right, mate. That's so that was episode. I think we're up to 13 as far as the list of things that we've done. Guys, if anyone's got any question for Jimmy, you can find his website. www.transitionschiropractic.com. Otherwise, if you got questions for me, Eric at brainandbodyhealth.com.au. But otherwise, thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. To learn more from Dr. Scott, visit our site at optihuman.com.au.